You know, Kirby gets a rep for being too easy, but to go even further, some think because it's too easy, it's not worth a full price tag, or being easy makes it less fun than a more difficult game, like say Dark Souls. But I would argue making an easy game in some ways is harder than making a difficult game. I'm going to be focusing on Kirby mostly for this analysis, but this also applies to other franchises people might say are too easy. Look at it this way, if a game is too easy, it can easily lead to becoming boring. And if a game is boring, people won't want to play it, let alone finish it. When making a game where the goal isn't to be difficult or spend hours on a certain part because you cannot beat it, then you ask, what's the challenge of making a game like, say, Kirby? The challenge and the hard part is balancing accessibility with creativity and fun. There is a fine line when creating an easygoing experience. Go too far one way, the game is dull and repetitive. Go too far the other, you alienate newcomers who you're trying to pull in. The game needs to be entertaining, inventive, and engaging, something the majority of Kirby games do deliver on. And if they did not deliver on that promise, then nobody would play the next installment. And if that happens repeatedly, it leads to a dead franchise. Just because easy games don't have the difficulty threshold of, say, a Dark Souls game, that doesn't mean it's an easier game to create. Arguably, it could be more difficult to develop because you're trying to reach a wider audience of many ages that will be able to complete and enjoy the experience without getting stuck for too long. But also on the flip side, not being bored senseless and the game feels like a chore to get through. Just because a game may not be difficult to complete does not make it a bad game or not worth your money. Kirby, while being not very difficult to complete, implements so many fun things that keep you engaged so you don't get bored from the simplicity of the game. With all the transformations Kirby can get, how you implement those power-ups throughout the level, the vast amount of choices you can make in the middle of a level on which power-ups you want to use, keep, or switch out for, and how they interact with the level design. These are many of the ways Kirby keeps you engaged even though completing a level or boss may not be all that difficult for you. You don't always need the looming threat of death creeping up on you to be invested in a game. Kirby games let you sit back, relax, and enjoy a fun experience and give you the feeling like you're an absolute powerhouse in so many of the levels with insane powers you have at your disposal. It's just absolutely fun to decimate everything on screen. And that in itself may provide more of a challenge when developing a game like Kirby. It needs to be fun enough to keep you happy and willing to play, while also not being overly hard, but leaves you feeling fulfilled on completion of the game. Developing and balancing all of that is very hard. You're trying to grab as many people as you can with a formula like that, and the slightest wrong move will not make it work. If they failed at the development of Kirby, all you would have is a slog fest that you wouldn't even want to finish, and you would just trade it in, refund it, or just put it in your backlog of games for eternity for it never to be heard of again. Making a simple game is just as hard as making a challenging game. I keep using this as the go-to example, so I'll continue to do so, but with a conventionally hard game like Dark Souls, you know going in it's going to annoy the crap out of you, and you'll be spending hours doing the same content over and over and over again, but that is the appeal of that game, the challenge. So the developers know from the get-go, if they make it as hard as possible and time-consuming, many players will find even the first few levels a nightmare to beat. And by doing that, they have achieved their goal, and that's exactly what the player base wants from games like that. There's a clear-cut goal. While with Kirby, the goal isn't to be challenging. The goal instead, from Nintendo's own mouth, is putting smiles on the faces of everyone we touch. Now you tell me, which sounds harder to make if given the choice? Make a difficult game that players expect to be difficult? Or develop a game that is going to make everyone happy and put a smile on their face? I would say the latter is much harder, as we know all too well, especially by being on the internet, making anyone happy nowadays is definitely a challenge. Taking some words as well from the creator of the Kirby franchise, Masahiro Sakurai, he even provides a bit of insight on some of the aspects I've talked about, as well as addressing the concerns of a game being labeled too easy. Sakurai goes on to say, I gave him the ability to fly because I thought it was too harsh to lose a life just for missing a jump. He also adds, I didn't mind making things a little easier. Inhaling enemies and flying both reduced the potential risks players faced during gameplay. This might seem like it would have sucked all the fun out of the game, but I wanted to make the first Kirby as accessible as possible for new players. During development, people asked, "Are you sure about this?" To which I replied, "Sure, I'm sure," and proceeded full steam ahead. Taking what Sakurai says here, again, the goal was never making players spend hours on the game, but making it an enjoyable experience for anybody to pick up and play. And his own team had the same worries as many other people do. Would making challenging segments easier in turn make the game less fun to play? I think with how deep we are into the Kirby franchise by now, I'd say the answer was a resounding no. I mean, think about it. If Sakurai had created Kirby in the same vein as every other platformer, meaning Kirby can't fly, Kirby does not get different powers, and only has a specific few instead, then you're taking away gameplay mechanics that make Kirby unique and enjoyable. Yes, those mechanics make the game easier to complete, but even though it's easy, you're having fun because those mechanics were implemented well, and without them, you would just have another by-the-numbers platformer, and how would that have stood out from the many others at the time? Even to this day, new mechanics are being added to the Kirby franchise to keep it fresh and unique gameplay-wise, like the Hypernova from Kirby Triple Deluxe, the mech suit from Planet Robobot, and the mouthful mode from Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Not to mention that with every installment we also get new copy abilities as well. Again, those mechanics may make the game easy, but the development team takes enough care to balance difficulty and fun, making it rewarding for the player to use. Sakurai was able to create a game where fun and enjoyment were the top priority, and was able to balance easier mechanics with great level design, sweet music, and a ton of gameplay mechanics to pick from. Doing these things made the game more accessible, but didn't make it boring. It made Kirby what it is today. And more game developers are thinking this way. Accessibility doesn't equal easy all the time. Look at fighting games, for example. Whether it's Dragon Ball FighterZ or Street Fighter 6, many fighting games are implementing simpler control schemes to get more people into playing them. And while this makes doing certain things in the game easier, once you get deeper, you learn more intricate mechanics, and it doesn't take away from the fun from the game itself. As for the argument that because a game is too easy or does not take a long time to beat, so it's not worth the time or money, I'll take a quote from the man himself, Sakurai, again. Sakurai goes on to say, "Now some games end when you beat them, but others, like arcade games, aren't so easy to put down, are they? If it's fun, you'll play it again and again. Though the first Kirby was relatively easy, those who played it kept coming back for more." And Sakurai isn't wrong, and this doesn't just apply to Kirby. I think every gamer, no matter who you are, you have a particular game or games that even after completing, you will revisit again and again, because it was a joy to play, whether it was easy or not. For me, as I've mentioned in other videos, I love Star Fox, especially Star Fox 64. I've played that a bunch, and even though I find it easy, it's fun. The same goes for other games I really enjoy playing, like Aladdin on the SNES, Luigi's Mansion, Donkey Kong Country, Kirby 64, Mario Sunshine, and a ton more. And a bunch of games I mentioned many people would consider easy and not time-consuming at all. But does that make any of them bad games? Of course not. Obviously, at the end of the day, everyone has different tastes, but to write a game off simply because it's, well, simple, I think it's a missed opportunity, because that game, while being simple, could have many other qualities that the developers thought of, and even thought about what would make you happy when playing. And that again, making everyone happy isn't just hard, but damn near impossible. Development of ideas, creativity, level design, player functionality, and most importantly, what holds a game together, fun. Balancing all of these is hard for any game, but again, from what I've seen, it's harder to appeal to a mass audience of many demographics while making sure your game is accessible but not boring. So let's give the developers of games like that some more respect, because it is definitely harder than we may have thought. And that's why I wanted to make this video, to remind people easy games aren't lazy cash grabs, and the development of these games is extremely difficult because you're casting a wide net and hoping to grab not just old fans, but new ones as well, casual or hardcore. I think many franchises have the intent of being long and hard, and honestly, it's a treat when you get a game that's well made that isn't either of those things, and can still match those other games in quality. So let's kick back, relax, and play some video games. If you guys made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching, and tell me your thoughts. Do you agree or disagree? And let's start a conversation. Again, I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Nath out.